summit or consultation where a whole range of societies together for change with some measure of desperation. There was a sense in which the similar reason and many more, and so from monitoring the elections on the day to monitoring the processes before that election day, but also in the end to be able to, on the strength of the scale of the campaign we are launching today, to be able to say something about the integrity of those elections in a way that gives an assurance, additional assurance, that indeed the counting, insofar as we were able to mobilize those election monitors that were in every polling stations, who would have been there to watch and to confirm that indeed what is being reported is what they saw with their own eyes. So in that way, we would be able to say, add our voice, put it that way, to the credibility of those elections. So it's important for civil society to be able to play that role over and above what we believe IEC will do on their own part. And similarly, if there are areas of violence, disturbances, of any disruptions or delay in delivering the ballot papers and so on, we would be able to also comment on such details as those, because they tend to affect the outcome. Our hope is that through the collaboration that we are working towards between now and then, the elections, we would like to be able to mobilize civil society in almost every part of this country, including faith communities, so that together we are able to deploy people in as many election polling stations as is possible, so that we can get a critical mass of being able to say, whether those elections were well supported by the public, but also whether there was credibility to them in some way. And so that is an important milestone for the life of the movement, to drive civil society agency. But also, as you know, with this also is a concern that South Africans, if they do become complacent and become less and less involved in the democratic process, we are likely to see diminishing voter turnouts and so on. So part of what we'd like to be doing is to actually encourage voter turnout. We are delighted to see the numbers of the last turnout. We heard that it was 1.7 million people who turned out for the first time to register, which is a good sign. We hope that that will all translate to people actually turning out to vote on the election day. So all of that said, we hope we can build together a network of people that A, are very engaged with the democratic process, but B, have a sufficient organization at the local level to be able to mobilize, to continue to engage elections. We look forward to the 2026 local elections as well. And the idea is that we also will rely on the agency of people that would have participated in this coming elections to be available to continue the work that they did in this 2024 elections. But also for our part, we hope to build a technological capacity to respond to some of the needs that arise in the task that we've set ourselves. So with those words, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome everyone. That is the reason that we have come this morning, and we hope that we can work to the time that we have committed ourselves, that will be out of here by 12 to 12 noon. Having said that, I'd like to, I believe Ms. Brigalia Bam will be connecting with us by video. It would be good for, is she, oh, okay.
So 2024 is likely to be a very highly contested
obviously,
election.
Ms. Bam needs
What do you
no
think?
introduction. She has served on the our nation also in the IEC, in the capacity as IEC as a commissioner, as a chair at one stage, but a very prominent member of our society, and so we're delighted to have a message of support from her. Mrs. Bam?
So 2024 is likely to be a very highly contested election. What do you think that civil society organizations need to do during this period?
I think there are two very important things for civil this time to do than ever before. One, it is for them to turn up in numbers, first to make sure that people register. Because the more the parties are, the more is going to be people who are contesting to find out what they want for their future. The second most important for people in civil society would be to observe elections, so that in each and every voting station, there are people there who are there to do a number of things. Some of the people who come as observers, really, they are part of that celebration. So when one sees observers, you just see people who are not here as school inspectors, as it used to be, watching only the wrong things, but they are also here as part of this celebration and participating by meeting people, talking to people, and above all to watch that all systems are followed properly and that everybody is received properly with respect, with joy. There is no disturbance of any kind. And so observing election is very key.
Right. Do you think that observing elections is a way in which people can be active citizens?
Very active. The most important reports in running the elections are the reports that come from observers. Those reports are key, not only for the country, but they're also key internationally. And so observing elections is a very, very crucial thing because it also determines the future. If the people feel the elections are not free and fair, things were not done properly at voting stations, and that the people had been drawn into wrong voting places, and that people were not getting proper professional care, all that adds into the atmosphere. And so observing elections and being there as part of them, those reports are key. It's a reputation of the country. It's the future of the government. Because if people feel the elections were not run properly, there were far too many mistakes, there were far too many things that were not observed properly, then it means the decision of the government that's going to rule has a negative image. It's all very well to get the votes and the number of votes that a party gets, and that is the expectation. But people must feel that the process was free and fair and just and done, not in any way that is dissatisfactory. And that's why observing elections is key, because it really has serious implications on the future image of the ruling party.
Morning, everyone. I'm Kristen Abrahams. I'm a member of the National Committee of Defend Our Democracy. Just to facilitate the session and just to say that we'll be having a number of inputs from the speakers who are here and then interspersed with a number of messages of support via video as well. Our next speaker is Mr. Thierry Tselane. Mr. Tselane is the Executive Chairman of the Institute of Election Management Services in Africa, and he's the former Vice Chairperson of the IEC. We'll keep our inputs brief, everybody.
2024.
5 minutes each, and I'll maybe just nudge you if you're taking any longer. Mr. Tselane.
Thank you very much to you, Chair, and to colleagues who are here and members of the media. The election observation is important. In 2024, it's actually going to be even more important. The reason why election observation is important is because that's where you basically ensure that the outcome of the results of election fairly represents the will of the people. The elections are about the will of the people, and therefore observers are there as auditors of the process to make sure that the process is followed, that everything goes according to plan, that there are no malfeasance in the process, and that incidents of irregularities are either minimized or completely eliminated. But another important element is that once that has actually happened, it inspires confidence in the electoral process. It gives legitimacy to the electoral process because it will have been observed by people who are credible, who believe, who on the basis of being independent are able to assure the community and the society as a whole that there were no irregularities in the process. But observers also work as the ears and eyes of the Commission. The Commission is not able to go to each and every voting station, and therefore the observers are able to identify some of the things that the Electoral Commission would not know and then bring those issues to the attention of the Commission. But because the electoral process also is not a static thing, things change on a regular basis. The reports that the Commission receives, it uses them to refine its own processes. Now, areas where we find the election observation even more important, it's areas where the elections are highly contested. It is areas where there is a certain level of instability, but also where there is a certain level of mistrust. In those societies, election observation become even more important. Now, my message to all those who will be part of this is that as observers, you've got an important role to play, and it's important that you collaborate and cooperate with each other, because no one election observation mission would be able to cover the country as a whole. Therefore, it becomes important for election observer missions to compare their notes and to share information. But one of the critical aspects also is that election observers have got to be trained, they've got to understand. You are not only looking at whether there is violence or no violence. You've got to understand what determines the integrity of the elections. And all those people who will be on the ground so that they understand the kind of the things that they're going to be observing. In particular, they've got to look at whether the legal framework is being followed, whether the electoral staff understand their processes and then they are performing their responsibilities with impartiality. They've got to check as to whether the Commission itself has got logistics in place, and that all those who are on the voters' roll are people who are voting, are people who are eligible to participate in the electoral processes. So training of observers is critical. You are not only looking at the political environment, you are looking at the technical aspect of the management of the elections, because that's where the elections are won or lost. And I would like to say that to defend our democracy, that this is a very important training. We understand this process, we've been in this process for a long time, so that your members and other organizations also understand what they should actually be observing in the electoral processes. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Tselane. I think that was so necessary, especially given the trends that we're seeing among people who are not registered to vote, particularly because of distrust in the system. And so we all understand our role in almost renewing the credibility of the system and how it functions. Just to give us some more background on what Election Watch is going to be about, we have a short video, and that will be followed by an input from Zakir Abadi, who is the Executive Director of Defend Our Democracy.
2024 is an important year. 54 countries will host elections. South Africa is one of them. It's our 7th national and provincial elections. 2024 marks 30 years of democracy. We've seen positive change, but also failure, state capture, unemployment, and poor service delivery. So, this election will be the most contested yet. Political parties will be vying for the top spot. In this context, how do we protect the integrity of our elections? Civil society organizations are coming together to observe the elections and pronounce on its integrity. This is under a grassroots national campaign called Election Watch. Your organization can join in. Collectively, we can get election observers and voting stations across the country for 2024. Do your country duty. Observe and monitor elections to uphold democracy. Register with Election Watch. Visit www.defendourdemocracy.co.za.
Ahmad, if you could please put on the slide presentation. Okay, so if we go to the second slide, I'm just going to present a little bit about what this campaign is about, why it's important, and why Defend Our Democracy is doing this. So what is this campaign? This is really a national civil society campaign aimed at observing and pronouncing on the integrity of the 2024 elections. And we know that these elections are at a national level and a provincial level as well. But it's also aimed at ensuring the overall success of the elections. And this is through educating, mobilizing South Africans to participate in this election process and become active participants in our democracy in the long run. Where will this be happening? This is happening in South Africa. We want volunteers from our country who are available to serve on election day at voting stations, and once they close, at then the polling stations. And we really want to build an organizational network in the months leading up to elections to develop a grassroots presence in communities and wards across the country. Who is part of this campaign? So this is a campaign being launched by Defend Our Democracy. And as Reverend Moss indicated, this follows our Conference for Democratic Renewal and Change, which took place in 2022. And here, a number of organizations, about 120 organizations, gathered and discussed what should be the agenda for democratic renewal and change in the country. And one of the items that emerged in the program of action was around observing the elections and launching a national campaign in 2024 in this regard. So it's really on the basis of this that we've now launched this campaign, and it's really open to civil society organizations across the country. So we want organizations to be able to come together to adopt this campaign as their own, but plug into a common system. So it's a common technical system that I'll explain a bit later, be part of a national network, share ideas, interact with each other, and then together send through information that will be collated on election day and will feed into a common system where we can analyze that data and then pronounce on the elections itself. There are many organizations, and Kristen will speak to some of them, who are doing election-related work, whether it's encouraging people to observe the elections, whether it's monitoring the quality of candidates, for instance, looking at political party funding in this period. And all of these organizations are welcome to join Election Watch. While it is primarily about observing the elections, all of these issues add to the overall integrity and credibility of the electoral process, and they are welcome to be part of the convenings in future as well. This campaign is really about organizations. So you do have individuals who may want to monitor elections. They can be part of this process, but the IEC accredits organizations only. So we will have to link them up with organizations under whose ambit they can monitor or observe the elections. And I think important to stress from our side is that it's a politically non-partisan campaign. We do have a growing list of patrons who we've approached to be part of this campaign. So far, we've got the names that you can see there on screen. So people from different sectors, the religious sector, people who are there from the legal fraternity, from academia. And I think as this campaign grows, as we go into different provinces, there are others that will put their names to this campaign as well. When will this campaign take place? So it's being launched today. It will run from November 2023 to the period immediately after the 2024 elections. It will include observation of the elections on the day of elections itself, as well as the counting process that follows thereafter. So that will be the sort of focal point of the campaign. It's centered around 2024, the technological systems that will be developed through this process, the reporting processes, the experiences, and really the civil society network that develops from this campaign. However, we strongly believe that this is something that is not limited to 2024. We can really build on it from here. Going into 2026, 2029, it can be taken into those elections as well. Why is this campaign important? I think Terry Tsalani, Reverend Moss spoke about some of the issues related to elections and the importance of observing elections. But in a global context, there are 54 other countries that will be hosting elections next year. So it's really an important period globally as well. We've seen, for example, in other countries, the US and Brazil, for example, how those electoral outcomes were questioned, how it created a degree of instability in those countries. To date, we've had the IEC running elections very professionally in this country. Our elections have been free and fair since 1994, and we want to maintain this trend. It doesn't mean that the elections are hotly contested, that they will be disrupted. And we think that civil society needs to play a role in ensuring that that credibility is maintained. But it's also important because during an election period, you have political parties that are very active. But what is really the role of an active citizen during this period? What is the role of someone who may not be part of a political party structure going door to door? And this is something that an ordinary person can do, can take up and give as part of their time to being an active citizen and to being a democracy volunteer. How does this campaign, or how will this campaign work? So first of all, we're building up a database of organizations across the country. So it means going province to province, really on a kind of provincial roadshow to speak to different organizations, to draw in their support, because ultimately you would have an organization in a particular community that is going to field volunteers or volunteer observers that will go into voting stations. There are over 23,000 voting stations in this country. We think that through the organizational network that we build, we'll be able to get a representative sample in order to pronounce on the integrity of this election. For 2024, we think that the priority provinces are Gauteng, Western Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. And that's really based on the number of organizations who we have in those provinces who we've previously worked with. We will be having observers in other provinces, but I think going, for example, into rural Northern Cape, for instance, may be a bit difficult in this election if there isn't an already existing civil society organization who we can link up with. So it's something that we aim to develop over time into 2026 and into 2029. Going into next year, there'll be a series of high-profile events that will take place, all the way from community meetings to events centered around key political moments. For example, the 2024 State of the Nation address is something that we're looking at. And it's through these that we aim to encourage public participation and maintain public interest in this campaign. And lastly, I think we want to work very closely with the IEC on this. It does require a degree of cooperation, and we know that we need to be independent of the IEC so that we can conduct oversight and observation work. But at the same time, the IEC does need to provide accreditation so that observers can go into voting stations and are recognized on the day. This is very briefly what the campaign phases look like. As you can see, it's building up momentum to the launch, and that's where we are, somewhere in the middle today. Obviously, during the holiday period, it will dip slightly, but then increases to a high point, depending when elections will be held. And that could be anywhere between May and August next year, depending on what date the president determines. And lastly, the last phase is really reporting back and looking at an assessment into next year, into 2026 and 2029. So what are the practical steps from here? We want organizations to mobilize the organizational volunteers to register with Election Watch, and I'll come to that in a bit. Confirm your accreditation with the IEC, that's absolutely essential so that you have permission to go into a voting station. There'll be regular training sessions into next year, just to educate observers on what to do, what not to do, but also how to use the technological app that we're building. And this is really an app that someone is able to go into a voting station with, send through live feedback if they have internet connectivity. If they don't have internet connectivity, be able to jot down that information on the system, and once they're able to link up to the internet, send that through as well. It does show up on a kind of live map on the back end, where you would have a group of people assessing the information that comes through. And if, for instance, there's something that comes through and we start getting maybe 10 reports where there's reports perhaps of violence in a particular area, we are then able to escalate that to the police in that area. We perhaps are able to reach out to the regional IEC person in the area and see how best to try and resolve the issue. So it does have live functionality as well. Observers obviously have to follow the IEC rules, get the accreditation cards, observer packs, etc. They will then go out, observe on election day, observe the counting process that takes place, report back into the common system. We'll have a team of people making sense of the data that comes through, and then really being able to pronounce on the election results itself. We are not there to take over the role of the IEC in terms of pronouncing over the results, but we think we're able to corroborate whatever comes out of our findings and our observations. This is the Defend Our Democracy website, and as soon as you open the website, you'll see something that says to register, click here, and that will take you to the registration system. And this is the Election Watch registration system. It's really the platform that we're using to build this organizational network. An organization called Solar Spectrum helped us develop the system, and we want to thank them for doing so. There's a bit that needs to be filled in if you are an organization. If you are an individual and you want to register nonetheless, and we can link you up with an organization at a later stage, the platform allows for that as well. And this is really the link that we will be putting out to organizations in the coming days to get them to begin registering on the system. That's it from me. Thanks, Kristen.
Thanks, Akira. I'll now call Andres Sibanyoni, who is the Communication Officer at Defend Our Democracy. Yeah, Andres, I think maybe speak there so that the press can hear you. Andres is passionate about media and politics. He has been a senior producer for SABC TV News, the media coordinator for Pan-African Parliament, and a freelance journalist for the Mail and Guardian and Daily Maverick. Andres will be sharing the press release and memorandum, as well as the list of organizations that have endorsed it.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, colleagues. I'm reading the memorandum from Defend Our Democracy. Election Watch, a collective commitment to safeguarding our constitutional democracy. We, the undersigned civil society organization, organized labor, business, faith-based, and community organization, sectoral networks, academia, and the media, reaffirm our unwavering commitment to ensuring the success and the integrity of the 2024 elections. As the country approaches 30 years of freedom in 2024, We acknowledge the immense stride made in transforming South Africa from its apartheid past to a constitutional democracy. It is with a sense of pride that we reflect on the ability of the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa to successfully run 6 provincial and national government elections, as well as numerous local government and municipal by-elections since 1994 with integrity and professionalism. We also commend political parties who in the last 30 years have accepted electoral outcomes and who by and large have not undermined electoral processes. We must, however, recognize that our democracy has been eroded through state capture, corruption, malfeasance, especially in the last 15 years. Putting political party and personal interests above that of the public has left South Africa in a state of crisis. The lack of government accountability has depleted public trust in our political system. South Africa will be among 54 countries that will be hosting elections in 2024. This election will be the most contested yet. We are cognizant of the global context where democracies in both developing and developed nations have come under immense strain. We have seen shift towards right-wing politics, coups, invasions, and insurrections. Even established democracies like Brazil and the United States of America have witnessed attempts in recent years to undermine the will of the people through doubt being cast on electoral results. We therefore collectively commit to a civil society-driven campaign called Election Watch that will center the call for active citizenry to ensure the success and the integrity of 2024 elections. In doing so, we will encourage, 1, observing the elections. We call on all organizations and individuals to rigorously observe the electoral process and join us in fielding as many observers as possible to be based at voting and polling stations across the country on election day. Based on our observation, we will pronounce broadly on the integrity of the elections and help safeguard the sanctity of the democratic process. 2, creating a nationwide network. We will form part of the nationwide network of organizations and individuals dedicated to democracy building efforts, laying the groundwork for democracy volunteers to embark on a mass scale observing from 2024 to 2026 and 2029 elections. Number 3, countering disinformation. We are committed to countering disinformation, inaccurate and fake news, populist rhetoric aimed at racial, ethnic, and xenophobic incitement, political destabilization, and violence throughout the election cycle. Number 4, ensuring voter and democracy education. We will educate citizens not only about the process of voting, but about the importance of it. We will strive to ensure that South Africans of voting age register to vote. Number 5, assessing candidate quality and party manifestos. We will encourage the public to critically evaluate political party candidates standing for office and make informed decisions about voting them in, as well as political party manifestos and potential coalition agreements. Number 6, monitoring political party funding and spending. We urge political parties to be transparent about their funding sources and spending during the election period and beyond, and to comply with the Political Party Funding Act. We will call out on the abuse of the state resources for party electoral purposes. Lastly, 7, commitment to long-term electoral reform. We are well aware that our current electoral system and political culture minimizes the opportunity for accountability of elected representatives. We will continue working towards reforming the electoral system and advocating for a new political culture so that politicians can be held more directly accountable by the public. In the embarking on the Election Watch campaign to observe, monitor, and pronounce on the integrity of the 2024 elections, we will work collaboratively, convene regularly, and employ a set of strategies. These include establishing database of organizations, building strategic partnerships, leveraging support from respected South Africans, holding provincial meetings, prioritizing key regions for observation and monitoring work, organizing high-impact programs, running media campaigns, developing technological capacity, providing training, and forming part of the IEC's Observer Program. We therefore call upon all who live in South Africa to support Election Watch and join us in becoming guardians of democracy. In doing so, we can ensure that 2024 is marked not only as the 30th year of freedom, but as the year of the active citizen, where we can safeguard and renew our constitutional democracy. This memo is endorsed by following organizations: Active Citizens Movement, Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Anglican Church of Southern Africa, Advice Desk for the Abused, Business Ecology, Campaign of Digital Ethics, Cape Town Islamic Educational Center, Cape Town Alumma Board, Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change, Congress of Business and Economics, Council of Advancement of South African Constitution, Defend Our Democracy, Extinction Rebellion South Africa, Freedom Under Law, Google to CAN, Helen Suzman Foundation, International Disarmament Initiative South Africa, isiZiba Community-Based Organizations of South Africa, Johannesburg Against Injustice, Johannesburg Institute of Social Services, June and Andrew Mlangeni Foundation, Legal Resources Center, Lens Politics, Letsema Care for Development and Democracy, Maibuye, Msunduzi Association of Residents, Ratepayers and Civics, Muslim Youth Movement, People's Choice, Progressive Tamil Movement, South African Council of Churches, Eastern Cape, South African Conversation Pty Limited, South African Democracy Election Network, South Africa's first community organization, Synergy Works Africa, the Center, the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa, the Peace Center, the Teddy Bear Foundation for Abused Children, Watch Elect, WE Media Lab, YMCA, South Africa. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Andres. I think in addition to the organizations that are listed on the memorandum, there are a number of civil society organizations across the country who are doing related work to elections, and we'd like to make mention of those also. So the Legal Resources Center is one of those organizations who's particularly focused on countering disinformation related to elections over social media, which obviously would pose a threat to elections and the credibility of it as well. Groundwork Collective is doing a lot of work getting young people to register to vote in next year's elections. The Tutu Foundation and Civics Academy is also focusing on voter education. And then the South African Council of Churches, alongside OUTA, the Democracy Development Program, Watch Elect, and Watch Elect Media Lab is focusing similarly on election monitoring and observation. My Vote Counts, I think, has been convening civil society since earlier this year around the 2024 elections and defining what needs to be done. Alongside their work, continuous oversight around the Political Party Funding Act and funding for political parties. The Social Justice Assembly, Kagiso Trust, and Activate the 28 group is also looking at the development of a civil society manifesto, focusing on minimum demands that civil society will be putting forward to political parties in the run-up to elections. And then In Transformation Initiative and the Network for New Beginnings is also convening civil society around elections in 2024. We're going to now have a few sectoral messages of support. A few will be from within the room and then a couple more online. The first one is from Obakeng Khache, who is a dedicated and dynamic young professional with a bachelor's degree in psychology. She's currently serving as the Youth Activism Program Manager at the Umid Kathrada Foundation. She's rooted in a passion for community engagement and youth empowerment, and her current work is focused on mobilizing and organizing youth across over 30 communities in Gauteng to take the helm in grassroots active citizenry.
Thanks, Christian, and good morning to everyone. My name is Obakeng Kate. I'm the Youth Activism Program Manager at the Umid Kathrada Foundation. And we are very excited about this initiative, and that is because of the work that we've been doing this year and prior to that with young people in different communities whose voices are often not heard or given the chance to express what they feel. So we've been going to we went into 30 in the first phase of our civic education workshops, encouraging young people to participate in democratic processes, but most importantly, highlighting that participation in democratic processes is not only going to the voting station and putting your X. It goes beyond that. It goes to how do you hold government accountable, how do you hold your local council accountable, and how do you participate in processes within your own local community before you even want to go and participate outside of your community. So we will be bringing in, our target is 200 young people who will be at various voting stations across Gauteng, because that is where our youth clubs are based. All regions of Gauteng, we have youth clubs. We are on 40 this year, and hopefully we'll be on 50 or more next year, so we could be bringing more than 200 young people, but also encouraging other organizations within our network that we work with, who particularly work with young people, to say, bring young people into the process. Let them not only be called or knocked onto when we need them to go and vote. Call them to participate in other processes outside of just voting, but also measuring that with encouraging them to register to vote and understanding why it is important to do so. Participation in democratic processes should not be limited to political parties, and we need to make that very clear. So like I said, we're very excited to form part of this campaign, and we look forward to having our young people capacitated enough to go into their communities and defend democracy, but also in the long run, participate in other processes of ensuring that democratic processes are strengthened in our country and young people take lead in that. Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks so much, Obakeng. We'll now have a video from Lawson Naidu. Lawson has a legal background and is the Executive Secretary of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, better known as KSAC. He has accumulated 25 years of experience within the political, parliamentary, business, and NGO sectors.
I stand here today on behalf of KSAC with a sense of purpose and commitment to the principles that underpin the foundation of any vibrant democracy: transparency, accountability, and the voice of the people. It is with a sense of responsibility that KSAC announces its support for the Elections Watch campaign, a critical initiative aimed at fostering a robust democracy in South Africa. As we approach the pivotal year of 2024, we find ourselves at the crossroads of our nation's destiny. In 1994, there were some who doubted that our democracy would be long-lived, and the doomsayers predicted that the nation-building project would fail. That they have been proven wrong is a testament to the resilience of our nation over the past 3 decades. The people have time and time again collectively defended our hard-won democracy. The upcoming elections will not only shape the trajectory of our future, but will also serve as a litmus test for the strength of our democratic institutions. Elections Watch is not merely a campaign. It is a call to action, a rallying point for civil society organizations across the country to unite in the pursuit of a fair, transparent, and accountable electoral process. We firmly believe that the collective vigilance of the people is the bedrock of a healthy democracy. Elections Watch aims to be the beacon that guides our nation towards a future where the democratic ideals we hold dear are not just upheld, but are celebrated. The integrity of our electoral process is non-negotiable. It is not enough to passively hope for a fair election. We must actively work towards it. As we embark on this journey, let us remember that the strength of a nation lies in the active participation of its citizens. We call upon every South African to join us in this endeavor, to be the vigilant custodians of our democracy, and to contribute to the shaping of a future that reflects the will of the people. Together, we will build a network that transcends individual affiliations and focuses on the common goal of safeguarding the democratic ideals that define us as a nation. Let us be the guardians of our nation's integrity, ensuring that the 2024 elections and beyond stand as a shining example of a free, fair, and transparent democratic process. Together we can make a difference, and together we can shape a future that truly belongs to the people.
We'll move to the next video. That's by Janet Jobson, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. Janet joined the foundation from a career in activism and in the development sector, both locally and globally. Previously, Janet was the Deputy CEO and Acting CEO for a year at the DG Murray Trust. Here at DGMT, Janet worked to grow the organization as a public innovator, aiming to build a South Africa in which all people can fulfill their potential.
My name is Janet Johnson. I'm in support of the Electoral Watch program. In 1994, when Desmond Tutu cast his first vote, he said it was like falling in love. And that's the hope we have for every South African who's going to be voting in 2024, that it can be an experience which fills both their hearts and their minds with the possibilities of the kind of South Africa we want to create. In order to do that, we need to ensure that it is an election that is free, that is fair, and is credible. And one of the ways we can do that as civil society is by ensuring the observation process. It's by doing long-term monitoring of the elections, particularly around critical human rights issues such as xenophobia, which are being mobilized in the run-up to the elections. It's also really important that we work with media partners to ensure that there's proper and accurate coverage of the election, that we share our insights from the different sectors that we work in to give a clear narrative and a clear sense of the critical importance of the issues civil society works on. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to share this message with you today, and I do hope that there's enormous success and progress that comes out of our collaborations as Defend Our Democracy over the coming months before the election in 2024. Thank you.
We'll do the last video and then we'll have everyone in the room speak. So the next video is from Otsile Nkadimeng, who is a high school student and the lead organizer of Fridays for Future South Africa. He's also the co-founder of the Sundial Movement, a climate network that connects high school students to take collective action on climate change. Alongside his role as a climate activist, Otsile serves as the executive director of So We Vote, a youth voting advocacy group.
Good morning. It is an absolute honor to be speaking to all of you at the launch of the Defend Our Democracy Movement's Election Watch initiative. This initiative is important. This initiative helps to ensure that there is an integrity, a fairness, and an honesty to the elections that we will have in 2024. It also serves to ensure that South Africa does not join a growing trend of countries around the world that have had their elections cast into doubt, and where people, rogue actors, have been able to take advantage of that to hijack the democratic process in those nations. So we as climate justice organizations that are part of this initiative recognize that there is a responsibility to ensure that we act. Though we in the civic space tend to run away from politics, this is the one political issue that we must run towards. So, recognizing that climate change and government and democracy are all equal parts of the same coin, we take this responsibility. We are happy and excited to be part of this initiative. We look forward to the incredible things that are going to come of it. We look forward to the collaborations that will come of it. We look forward to ensuring that South African people can have a sense of integrity and trust in the electoral process. But we also look forward to ensuring that there is strong accountability. Accountability is important in these elections. We must ensure that no political actor is able to hijack this process and do what they want with it. This is the people's election. These elections are all about making sure that the people's voices are heard. And in the climate space, we recognize that for us to get a strong response to climate change, strong response to environmental sustainability, we must make sure that these elections are free and fair, because the people's voices will be heard, and the people are calling for climate justice. So, we look forward to working with all of you. We look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you so much for listening.
We have a message of support also from Cass Kuvadia, who is the Executive Director of Business Unity South Africa. I think Cass is joining via Zoom. Many of you would know that he retired as Managing Director of the Banking Association of South Africa after spending 15 years there. He's still active in numerous business organizations and in civic life, and he'll give us a message from that sector.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and I hope you can hear me. Apologies for joining a bit late, but I got caught up in a meeting. Just to say that we've had a discussion at BUSA about the upcoming elections. We've also met with the IEC to understand from the IEC what's the best role business can play to ensure a free and fair and transparent election. I think one of the critical issues is to ensure that as many people as possible register to vote. And a number of our members have programs in place to encourage registration and to promote registration. And where necessary, BUSA will coordinate those programs to ensure that they are up to scale and we get as much benefit as we can from voter registration program that business is undertaking. So that's already on the go, and we believe that is important. We believe it is important that as many people as possible register. I think that it's also very important that we understand the climate around which the elections are happening and will be happening. One, there seems to be common cause that these will be the most complex and probably the most difficult elections since the election in 1994, where we gave birth to our democracy. And as a result of that, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of rhetoric. All political parties are trying to position themselves with a view to garnering votes. I think what we want to do, including as business, and I think broader areas of civil society need to do, is that we need to, in all our work and the way we promote the elections, focus on what the real issues are. I think that we need to ensure as civil society, broader civil society, that we focus on the areas that politicians and in government, in power at the moment, and politicians wanting to get into government, should be focusing on. So if you look at what's happening in the municipalities at the moment, take Joburg as an example, all the debates, all the shenanigans that are happening are all about power and resources. Not once has any political party talked about service delivery to people. And I think that it's our responsibility to ensure that that comes to the fore, that we hold candidates to account on what they're going to do to actually improve people's lives, and we ensure a free and fair and a transparent election, and we all need to work together with that. We also need to ensure that the IEC is capacitated sufficiently to conduct those elections in a free, fair, and transparent way, so that by the time we get the results, we are all confident that we have confidence in the results. And finally, I think we would appeal to all political parties participating in these elections. It's going to be a tough election. The results are going to be complex, and we would appeal to all political parties to accept the results as signed off by the IEC. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cass. We'll now play
Thank
the
you.
video from Gideon Duplessis, who's the General Secretary of Trade Union Solidarity. Gideon started his professional career in 1994 at the Department of Constitutional Development as a senior constitutional planner. He was mainly involved in conducting global constitutional research in support of drafting the South African Constitution.
Hi, I'm Gideon Duplessis. I'm the General Secretary of the Trade Union Solidarity. Solidarity supports Defending Our Democracy's Election Watch campaign. It's a very important campaign, so that we not only encourage members and participants to vote in next year's election, but it's also important to be actively involved in the monitoring of the build-up to the elections and obviously around the elections itself, because we cannot just sit back and criticize and want change and want a different country, but we don't hold the politicians accountable. And we need to do that, and that is what Defending Democracy is doing, but Defending Democracy is now taking it further and also assist and pave the way for us also to get actively involved in monitoring the elections. So therefore I will also encourage other civil society organizations to also support these initiatives and get your members to also register as monitors for the elections, but also make sure that you encourage people to vote, because this is the most important election after the 1994 elections that is coming up next year.
Great. We have 4 more messages of support from within the room, and then we'll do a Q&A, which should last around 20 minutes, but we should be able to wrap up by 12 o'clock. So Moleboheng Mokoko will speak next. She's a journalist at the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change. Her career began in radio and has over the years spanned across print and digital media. She's reported on topics of service delivery, xenophobia, and democracy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to share a short message of support from the CABC. We mostly track online conversations on divisive issues on social media in South Africa. Our democracy program has tracked narratives that influenced our last local government elections and reported on the disturbing growth of anti-immigrant sentiment online, which has now become an election rallying point. For next year's elections, we will be supporting the youth to register and vote, hopefully in large numbers. This aligns with the Defend Our Democracy's Election Watch campaign. We support the campaign to encourage active citizenship, monitor online conversations about the elections, and report on mis- and disinformation that seeds online and makes its way into our everyday lives. We are encouraged that exposing mis- and disinformation in next year's elections is part of Election Watch's campaign. We will also be following online narrative that undermine the IEC, influences that seek to undermine the democratic process and threaten our elections. It is our privilege to work collaboratively with all these organizations and support the Election Watch campaign. Thank you.
Thanks, Moleboheng. I think we'll just go as you are sitting. So the next speaker is Mr. Sipho Hotsticks Mabuse. They didn't give me a bio for him, but I think we all know who he is. South African icon, about to become part of all of our homes during December, a fixed feature. So Mr. Mabuse, over to you.
Good morning. Is that? Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this auspicious occasion. I was hoping that I would not have to speak, because speaking is not really one of my strengths. I'd rather be on stage performing and singing, and I find myself sometimes being drawn into these conversations and so on. However, the little that I might have to say now is such that I do hope I'm not here to speak because I represent a particular organization. You know that I'm a musician, and I don't want to feel that I'm here speaking on behalf of my colleagues and especially the arts. I will speak on my behalf, and hopefully what I will say is something that represents the interests of the people that I work with, mostly my colleagues in the music industry. But before I continue, I must add that there is so much discontent out there. And I don't think that we have really grasped the discontent that is pervasive in our society. I live in the township, and in most cases when I interact with people and I say, are you going to vote? I'm going to vote. It's always, you know, I don't want to feel people that, people are disaffected, because most of the people will say, why should we vote? Why? What is it that has happened that has encouraged us as a people, you know, to go and vote? And of course, I must commend the IAC for having taken the initiative to educate people, especially young people, about elections. But young people need more than just an election. Young people need to know what it is after the election that will make their lives better. And I'm encouraged to be part of this organization that we've brought in civil society. Yeah. We brought in members of the civil society, all these groups that have been brought in here, and some of the people that have spoken, to speak truly and honestly about why the elections are important, in particular, the 2024 elections. It's 30 years of democracy. The question, though, is, has democracy delivered? That is a question that remains in the, you know, in people's minds. Yes, maybe the elections are important, but at the end of it, what is it that we are going to achieve after that? So we do hope that as we sit here and we speak, particularly with the media, we're able to say, help us educate, advance the most important information, that these elections, these ones in particular, because now suddenly everybody is a politician and everybody wants to be the president of the country. Well, not from a particular organization, but so if we can go out there and educate people to say, go out, because if you don't go out and vote, then you have no reason to complain. You have no reason to say, why should I vote? So I do hope I can mobilize the arts community to say, wherever we are, whatever we do, let's encourage people, particularly, and I keep mentioning young people. This is about you. We had our joy. We've had our satisfaction. 1994 for me was catalyst. It was one of the most important events of my life, because after having lived for over 34, 40 years, for the first time, I understood what it is to be free, to be able to say, I choose a particular organization to represent my interests. So we're here to actually ensure that young people, and I'll keep mentioning that go out there, please. This is about you. You know, the joy of having crossed, you know, just the joy of doing that for the first time is critical. And with those words, I must thank Defend Our Democracy for the Election Watch campaign. And I do hope that I can add value to it and will ensure that we get the results that we are here for. Thank you.
I think my mic died, but that's fine. That was profound, Mr. Mabuse. You're almost as good as your performance. I think you could have just said, we don't want democracy to burn out.
I've been watching you. Maybe that's what I should have done. That you didn't go for elections.
Can we have the stand so that I can...
You want to stand? You need a stand.
I'll introduce
I'll hold the mic. Can I hold it for you?
Yeah, of course.
I'll hold the mic.
All right.
I'll hold the mic.
All right.
I'm used to this, by the way.
Okay. Freek Robinson is a veteran radio and TV journalist and current affairs anchor. During the CODESA talks and the period leading up to the 1994 election, he was very much involved in reporting on events, and he anchored the program agenda on SABC2. He was also the chair of the live TV debate between Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, broadcasting to some 800 million people across the globe. He is now semi-retired and does interviews for the internet platform Linet. Throughout his career, he's engaged in issues in a positive manner to stimulate constructive debate and reconciliation.
Thank you very much, and what an honor to be with you, all of you, and Sipho holding the microphone for me. So my voice.
It's my job.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's absolutely lovely to be with you here. We as a civil organization, Dialogue for Action, are delighted to join Election Watch. Dialogue for Action was established some 2 years ago, and we are a bunch of mainly Afrikaans-speaking, whiteys, a bit older, but nevertheless still active. We want to make a contribution to our country, promoting reconciliation and the values of our constitution through dialogue, and not in the courts and always be in conflict. We are committed to this country. We are here to stay. We are professionals with skills and experience who want to and can make a contribution. Many consider the 2024 election as very important in the most since 1994. It is therefore vital and important that these elections must be seen to be free and fair and to have credibility that can be trusted. We are happy to be part of the defending of our democracy and by supporting Election Watch. So that, from Dialogue for Action, thank you very much.
Thank you. Last, we have Mr. Nobia Irwin, who is part of the Safe and Inclusive Church, that is a provincial branch of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, within which she holds the communications portfolio.
Thank you very much to everybody and for the opportunity to be here amongst our prestige colleagues. It's quite an honor. So regular and free and fair elections is one of the cornerstones of our democracy. Independent electoral commissions and an impartial judiciary also adds to the foundation. The area in which our democratically elected leaders have failed are well documented, well and widely documented. As a church, we stand firm on the side of the lost, the least, the last, and in the quest for justice and peace. It is our fervent desire to feed the hungry, comfort the dying, clothe the naked, and shelter the homeless and the stranger. By encouraging people to participate in elections is one of the ways in which these desires can be fulfilled. By casting a vote, and for that vote to matter, is one of the ways in which we ensure that the voices of the ordinary people are heard and that their lives can be changed for the better. We need to be the eyes and the ears for all, both in preparation, during and after the election process. Voter education, access to fair and reliable information is one of the roles the civil society could play. As a church, one of our duties is to correct error by pointing out over-exaggerated promises, serve as an active and historical evidence, and by upholding the standards we are called to. Ask the difficult and accountable questions. We have already started the process of voter education, particularly around encouraging young people to register and sharing messages on why they need to participate. We need to restore hope in our country to all God's people. Our message to our organizations is to other organizations is to join the campaign. Send observers across all voting stations, as it is through active participation that we are able to stop potential tampering with votes, ensure people are treated with dignity, without intimidation, ensuring that they are able to vote their conscience rather than coercion. And we can affirm as the Anglican Church of Southern Africa is committed to providing election observers across as many voting stations, counting centers, and communities as possible. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Zenobia, and thank you to everyone for your messages of support and inputs today. We'll now open for some questions. I think let's take a couple and then we'll give it over to the panel and then a couple more. So let's take these three. Irfan, I see your hand at the back. So we'll start with you, sir, and then the two ladies in the front. We'll do some answers and then we'll take another round.
Oh, sorry. Busi Chimombe from the SABC. I've got a couple of questions. The first is, I suppose, a perennial question that you're used to answering as civil society. So, for instance, where do you get your mandate to do what it is that you're doing? Some people would say that you're self-appointed defenders of democracy, and why don't you just stick to what it is that you do best, which is looking after the bread and butter issues of poor and vulnerable South Africans? That's the first one. The second one is, have you observed some laxity in terms of observation of elections up until this point? Is that part of the reason why you believe it's important to actually come in and supplement or complement what is happening in this particular election? And probably my second last question is, observing elections is very politically charged. It depends who you are. And in terms of credibility, we saw that with the SADC mission to Zimbabwe. What gives you why are you convinced that you will be seen as independent and whatever it is that you report on will be taken as something that is credible? And then the last thing is, where are you getting your funding from? Because clearly you're going to need data analysts and all sorts of things. Volunteers will need stipends. Where are you getting your funding from? Thank you.
So when we do the answers, can I direct the general civil society questions to a number of civil society presenters, and then the specific ones around funding, the particular observation campaign and it being politically charged, I'll direct to someone from Defend Our Democracy. Is that okay? Okay.
Hi everybody, it's Natasha Puri here from SABC News. I've got two questions. As Election Watch and the various civil society organizations under this ban, I mean, how would you hold, or how will you actually hold political parties accountable? Not only political parties, but independent candidates, because they'll also be, vying for next year's elections or contesting next year's elections. Because, I mean, a political party could just easily say, I don't have to account to Election Watch. An independent candidate could easily also say the same thing. So how will you also hold them to account? In terms of the commitment made to monitor political funding and spending, in regards to the Political Funding Act, I mean, there are loopholes. So with that system, so Ntate Terry, if I decide to give you a brown envelope, as a donor, and you're a political party, nobody knows that I gave you a brown envelope. The IEC can't, doesn't know about such. So as civil society, how will you ensure that you actually hold political parties accountable in terms of this and independent candidates? Thank you.
Take that one more question and then we'll get some input.
Dumelang Sanbonani. My name is Kenny Mabasa. I'm one of my organization actually endorsed the election, so I'm part of the family in a way. Quickly, I'm going to be a bit melodramatic just so that I make sense. There's something missing in our messaging. I don't know why, but I suppose because to some level we take peace for granted. We take it as given that these coming elections are going to be peaceful, they'll be non-violent, etc. So for me, that's the concern, primarily because of my background My little organization is called IDISA, International Disarmament Initiative of South Africa. It's a predecessor to the organization that called the slogan pre-1994, use the ballot, not the bullet. Those are old enough will remember that organization. It was a ceasefire campaign, and I'm the last director of that organization before it went under. Now, for me, the messaging will be still, we call for peaceful, non-violent election. I think that messaging needs to really go further. Thank you.
I think I'll start here with Rigotsofetse Chikane. Maybe you can address the issues posed specifically to Defend Our Democracy. And then we'll just go along the table for input from civil society organizations who want to respond.
Yeah, so I can respond to a few of the questions. So the main one, the question about where do we get our mandate from? Anyone can be an election observer in this country. We're not plugging in and falling from the sky like manna. What this campaign is really focused on is this idea of how do you create a coordinated effort among civil society. In the current iteration around electoral observation, individual organizations will register to become an observer, and then they go into a polling station, they get their accreditation from the IEC. And the goal of Election Watch is to say, how do we combine civil society's voice together in a coordinated effort? Right, so it's not just one organization reporting in one particular incident at one particular voting station, that if there's multiple incidences happening across multiple voting stations, that information is transferred as quickly as possible towards the IEC. The other point around that is we're not trying to cast doubt on the IEC. In fact, we're working quite closely with them, right? This idea about not taking our democracy for granted, or not taking the integrity of our elections for granted. And the idea behind Election Watch is to ensure that organizations are not doing that. All the work we do preceding to elections around civic education, voter education, doesn't end the day before elections. It continues into that day and into the future. Where we get our mandate from, as Zakira explained at our 2022 conference for democratic renewal, where there were around 120 organizations gathered, they gave us this idea of what are the five core pillars that we should really base Defend Our Democracy on. And one of the proposals that came from that was around electoral observation. This idea about not, again, taking our elections for granted. And that leads back to, and I completely agree with the gentleman at the back, that it has to be peaceful, right? That message has to be integral to the argument and the proposals that we put forward. Will we be convinced that we're independent? I think Defend Our Democracy has shown in multiple different platforms that we're able to move and we're trusted across civil society because of the manner in which we can deal with multiple different stakeholders, multiple different political opinions and views. I think our independence also comes from the idea that in a very formal sense, we have to apply elections are part of the election process or register. On the question around holding political parties accountable, I can't speak to the funding elements to things, but civil society over the last 2 years leading up to these elections has seen a concentrated effort around how to make sure that political organizations follow the rules of the game, first and foremost, how they also contribute to the electoral mandate given to them, and furthermore, to make sure that they are held accountable in multiple different avenues. I won't answer the money aspect of it, but over the last 2 years in particular, there's been a huge spike. We had mentioned 2 different partners last week, the Trust and the Social Justice Association, 100 organizations on this very point as well. So I think there's a lot of effort happening within the space to the elections around holding officials accountable.
Can I maybe ask if there are any society organizations first who perhaps want to respond to the issue around where do you get your mandate and not stick to the bread and butter issues? Zakira, you wanna? Okay. Okay. You also speak to the funding part of Defend Our Democracy, and then Reverend Moss. Okay, sure.
So a couple of things from my side. One is, what are the bread and butter issues? I don't think there's a difference between being a civil society organization that's, for example, involved in humanitarian work, and that certainly has its place in this country. So going into a community, opening up a soup kitchen is really important work. But at the same time, conscientizing people about democracy, about voting, voter education is similarly a bread and butter issue. We've done an exercise in some of our engagements in communities last year, saying that when you wake up in the morning, list everything that you do, from the minute that you get up to the end of your day, and then tick off which of those activities are political or influenced by politics. And ultimately, everything on that list is linked to politics in some way. What time you get up, where you live, what transport you take, the price of the toothpaste that you're using, the price of the bread that you are eating in the morning, whether you have bread to eat in the morning, all of those issues are fundamentally politics. So as civil society, maybe politically non-partisan, but our work is fundamentally linked to political questions. And I think that's the important differentiation. In terms of laxity, previously, I think one area that we've noted from election observation work previously is that election observers are given a book to tick off. Did the voting station open on time? Were ballot boxes closed at the end of the day and sealed? And that information is collated a month later, sent to the IEC really for the next election. What's the different factor in this particular campaign is that where there's internet connectivity, it's almost immediate. And if there isn't internet connectivity, at least within the next few hours, if you can get back to your civil society office or go to a public library where there may be Wi-Fi, for instance, you are able to feed that information in almost immediately. And that allows for escalating issues to whoever may be able to address them almost on an immediate basis. The issue of the if organizations are independent, every organization may have leanings in a particular direction, whether that may be right, left, however you may want to define it. But the power of this campaign is that it is open to as many organizations from across. The diversity that brings is in itself a strength, because it doesn't matter where you see yourself on that line from left to right, however you may define involved in trade union, for example, on a big scale to this, is what really gives it the kind of thousands of organizations across the country, depending on how we're able to mobilize over this next period. In relation to funding, different organizations here may be getting their funding from different sources. From Defend Our Democracy, like all other civil society organizations, we apply for grant funding. To the number of grant funding applications that are put forward to civil society or open to civil society organizations. Other than that, we go to business people in this country and we say, if you are interested in democracy work, can you please help fund organizations? It is extremely difficult in this particular climate to keep an organization running, to make sure that rental is paid, that staff get their salaries on time. And we have to really work hard, oftentimes, asking service providers like the people who are providing sound here today, for example, please give us a discounted rate. Can you do this for us for free? Can this venue of the church be given at a discounted rate? So it's really hard work, and we want to thank the people that have contributed overall. I think society organizations should be transparent about their funding, and we would certainly be able to make available. The question around holding politicians and political parties and more broadly accountable. So I think one is where organizations themselves do that, and you've seen organizations like AUTA, Freedom Under Law, Helen Suzman Foundation over time doing this work. But what's really important, and maybe Obakeng, coming from the Kathrada Foundation, they have what is called Action for Accountability. And it's a new process of trying to get ordinary community members involved and capacitated with accountability tools and how to use them effectively. And in this election, one of the things that we are considering is how do you evaluate political party candidates lists that come out? How do you see, okay, on this list, has there been someone who has been implicated in the Zondo Commission report, for example? What should we be asking political parties if that is the case? Is there someone who perhaps has a criminal record? Is that allowed, for instance? So I think it's really capacitating people with the tools to do accountability work. And then lastly, the question around loopholes in the Political Party Funding Act. Yes, there are loopholes in the Political Party Funding Act, but that doesn't take away from the huge victory that just getting that act into being was for civil society. Because for the first time, it's really allowed civil society to scrutinize political party funds, where they come from, and to push political parties to ensure that periodically those funding, that funding information is made available. Is there more to do in this regard? Certainly, there's a lot more that needs to be done. Inter-party funding, for example, or inter-party campaigning and how that gets funded. There may be all sorts of other loopholes, but I think it's an important start.
I think sometimes there is a misunderstanding on the issue of this mandate. Political parties get mandate from their supporters and through the structures that they've created. But the structures in electoral democracy most of the time derive their mandate from the legislation. So if you ask the IEC, where do you get your mandate from? The IEC will say, we receive a mandate from the Constitution and then from the Electoral Act. Now, where do this organization, who are going to be observing, are they getting their mandates from? They're getting their mandate from Section 84 of the Electoral Act, which recognizes the role of the election observers. And it is clear there that it is consistent with the provision in the Constitution, because it says that election observers have got to assist in terms of a creation of environment for free and fair elections, which is a provision in the Constitution. You know, so you've got to look at the issue of the mandate within the legislation. And again, election observers, in terms of the legislation, have got to conduct themselves in a particular manner. They cannot support any political party or candidate contesting the election. So that issue of impartiality is not only in terms of the history of the organization, but there is a legislative framework that governs how observers have got to operate. Section 99 also provides a code of conduct that all election observers have got to sign. You know, so that's the mandate, that's the framework that governs how this has got to operate. Now, there is also a question that was asked about how do you hold political parties and candidates accountable. There is a legislation, there is a particular way that political parties and candidates contesting the elections have got to conduct themselves. They've got to stick to that. There is a code of conduct that every candidate contesting the elections signs. We've got to hold them accountable to the code of conduct that they have signed to say that they're going to be behaving in a particular manner. Any party that does not behave in that manner, the framework in the Electoral Act indicates what a prohibited conduct is, what criminal conduct is. So you hold them accountable by sticking to the provisions of the legislation. That's the only way that you can actually deal with it. And the issue of brown envelopes, I think, has been attended to. But we've got to look at this thing also in totality. The banks also have got the responsibility. If a person is going to be withdrawing a certain amount of money, that person has got to be accountable for that particular money. So the brown envelopes, whatever the amount that is in circulation, has got to come from somewhere. And then therefore all other instruments that are there in the society have got to play their role into making sure that you do not actually find money laundering and money moving all over the country, not knowing how that money got to be in circulation. But the framework that is there in party funding, of course, there's a lot that still needs to be done in order to improve it. I've got my own opinions about certain things that still have to be changed in that or amended in terms of that legislation, but there is a framework that tries to govern the funding of the political parties, and it's a positive step.
Let me add to that a couple of things. The first one has to do, maybe piggyback on your one about the brown envelope, because it was given to you, she said. If it was given to you, how would we know? I suppose the short answer is that we won't know if anyone has been given that brown envelope, particularly if they are a first offender. If they are not a first offender, then they already have a criminal record on the basis of which a whistle could be blown. But I think that this is election watch, not corruption watch. So there's a sense in which we don't want to have a mission creep where we take more than what we are signing up for. What we want to do for this particular campaign is to monitor this particular election. Does it answer all of the questions that this country has developed over the last couple of years? No, it doesn't. It reduces them. It does have a limiting impact on corruption. And so that obviously means that those organizations such as Corruption Watch can take it up in a different way from us. The second one is really an existential question for the very democracy itself. I think the question was whether and how what makes us think what we say will count, or the voice of civil society will count. I think it would be a sad day if it didn't count. In other words, if we're building a democracy where the voices of the people, in whatever formations they find themselves, if that voice doesn't count, then we have a bigger problem than we imagined. And so the task, I suppose, of Election Watch, which also responds to the question many young people ask. Dadema Buse was saying, young people are asking, why should I vote? Very important question. It's loaded with personal experience of young people in the last little while. And so in a sense, you have to answer this question, why would this vote matter? And I think that part of the success of the campaign is to demonstrate that to the degree that we can mobilize enough people to actually do the voting and choose the sort of political parties that they want, and hopefully they will indicate also the sense of disapproval for those parties that have created the mistrust that is in our society. To that degree, I think that will count. But what matters for us for this particular campaign is to say, have these elections been stolen? Are there possibilities that they might? Are there possibilities that the will of the people might be sabotaged in some other way? To the degree that we can, to guarantee that, yes, from as far as we have looked at the situation, there is a good reason to believe the outcome of those elections. Obviously, whether or not the count we'll have to watch the track record of those who are voted in and take on one level or another. But that is an existential question for our democracy. If we lose that ability to answer this question, I think our democracy will start to decay.
We'll open for another round of questions. Can I just ask that whoever's asking the questions, keep it quite concise, and then the speakers as well. We just have around 10 minutes left. So I stand at the back before, but we'll back and then you, sir, and then the lady here. I don't know if I'm missing any hands on the left. Not? Okay, cool.
Thank you so much. It's energizing to see civil society go. As somebody who's now on the other side, I think my question is, there's a mention of political parties and potentially engaging them. Has there been thought on how that will work and how we can intervene to listen and engage and ensure that we uphold the same principles and values that are being shared by this campaign, and ensuring that it's collectively spread to all our organizers as well? Yeah, thank you.
Ezekiel Kikano from the Helen Susman Foundation. They are observers. And when is the training going to start? Thank you.
New parties entering the fray, and yeah, just maybe explain this emphasis.
So on including political parties, I mean, we went back and forth with this in different iterations of what the project would look like. At one point, we thought, should we include political party observers on our system? Systems, one for civil society and one for observers themselves. We've come to the decision on that we'll just focus on civil society and let political go through their own process. We would ask political organizations in the lead up to the elections is around training their observers as well, around how to behave inside a voting station, what their responsibilities are. Whilst most cases that is done quite well, in the incidences where it isn't done quite well, you see these flare-ups taking place, and I think there's that responsibility. We're always open to talking to as many political parties as possible about their responsibilities towards the country, their responsibilities towards the election day, and it's the work that will continue going forward. On the training will be done in two particular ways, and Zaki can correct me if I get this wrong. There is training that will come from the IEC themselves. In those situations, that will be the physical training or the training materials that they'll email individuals from the last conversation that we had with the IEC. What we want our app to also function as, so everyone who downloads the app, is that the app will also provide training materials as well, if I'm not mistaken. That's the type of materials that we'll send. When we start that off, I wouldn't be able to answer at this very moment in time. And there was just one last question. No, I think that's it for me.
Thanks. So I think just on the issue of training, one is the IEC's training, which is extremely important because that gives you the knowledge of how to conduct yourself or an observer conducts himself in a voting station, what to do, what not to do, what are the regulations. And then it's the technical training, so how to use the app, how to feed in information. But beyond that, it's also the broader democracy education that goes with it. And I think this will be incorporated into next year, the training process. The timelines are partially dependent on when elections will be held. If elections are in May, obviously it would be sooner. If elections are towards the latter period in August, it would be scheduled accordingly. The issue of why this election is an important one, for a very practical reason, it's the first time that this election is being held under a revised electoral act, so it's the Electoral Amendment Act. That act has been changed slightly to allow for independent candidates in this election. And that act is still currently before the Constitutional Court. There has been a challenge by some organizations to it. And it's really the first time that this new act will be tested in an electoral process. The second reason, I think, goes to the debate around the broader political scenarios that we're in at the moment. One, I think Defend Our Democracy has previously stated, again from its conference that took place last year, that this country is at a point of crisis. And how do you address that crisis? What are people's political choices within that crisis? And while we will not dictate to any person how they should vote, I think we can certainly empower them with the tools to inform their choices and to make sure that their choices are done on an informed basis. And I think that for all intents, there's been lots of discussion from different research groups, different political analysts around possibilities of coalition politics into this next period. Political parties themselves are engaging around this issue. And I don't think we can, as civil society organizations, divorce ourselves from that conversation. And that's really why the next year is an important year for this country. However, that being said, 2026 and 2029, we think will also be hotly contested. There probably will be many new entrants into the political space. And going into that period, I think we would need to engage perhaps with many more people and many more organizations on the issues that begin to emerge then. I think that maybe Kristen and CABC may be able to take questions around the issue of online narratives. However, the one thing that I do want to say is that online narratives are an important indicator, but it's not the only indicator around electoral destabilization. We want to reiterate that South Africa's elections, in spite of whatever challenges there may have been from 1994 to date, and there were challenges in 1994, have been free and fair. And that's really a trend that we would like to see being taken forward.
Just on the question around the tensions in the elections, I'm going to give a very premature answer to that question. I think one of the things that we asked ourselves at the CABC when we're analyzing online conversation is this conversation inspired by events happening on the ground, or is it just an organic conversation that will affect events on the ground? And that's what we usually do for a lot of the work that we've done in the democracy and the xenophobia space. Now, we've released a couple of reports over the course of this year, which have found that the anti-immigrant online sentiment was being mobilized for political gain. I cannot speak on tensions that we can expect in this election because we are in the process of developing that dashboard. So what we're looking into is the general election conversation, and we're also looking at the issues that South Africans are most likely to care about, as well as the policies, and we're trying to see what is dominating the election conversation in South Africa. So I cannot give you an answer as to the tensions that are going to be, that we're seeing with the online data, because that's something that's still ongoing, but that's what we've seen in the online anti-immigrant conversation, which is closely linked with the democracy conversation.
Great, thanks, Moleboheng. And oh, sorry, Mr. Tselane, go ahead.
Just wanted to respond to just two issues. One, just in addition to what Zagira was saying earlier on about training, we also provide training. And about 2 weeks ago, Tim Moodis and myself were training media organizations on the elections for next year. So there are many other organizations there that provide training other than the Electoral Commission itself. And then on the issue of what's unique, again, we've got to look at what has been happening. Before 2021, in South Africa, the metros were controlled by specific political parties. Now, it's under coalitions. Almost all the metros are under coalition. So just looking at the trend, and then looking at Johannesburg, looking at Ekurhuleni, where a party with 1 seat or 2 seats can become a mayor, this has given confidence to quite a number of political parties that it is possible, if the trends continue for national and provincial elections, that they could also be they could be part of government. And that's what makes it different, that the days of one dominant political party are beginning to basically disappear. And any political party participation is important, and then therefore the contestation, the level of contestation is going to be extremely high as a result of that. It is the trends of the performance of the political parties over the past few years that gives that indication that everybody believes that their vote is going to make a difference. They can be the president, they can be the premier, they can be anything, even if you've got one seat in wherever you will be. But also the issue of independence coming in for the first time, as Zagira was saying.
Thanks. I think I'll abuse my privileges slightly as a chairperson as well, as a chair, not a chairperson. Just to say also to the question, Ezekiel, around training, I think one of the things that will happen is once you sign up, you will receive notifications about when training will take place and on which platforms. So I think it's the signing up that's the major thing, and then from there, the process will be made clearer to whoever signs up or whichever organization signs up. And then Lerato, I think also on your question, at the Legal Resources Center, I'm a candidate attorney there, and one of the things that we used was the CABC's data on xenophobic violence online. And that really provided the impetus for us to also test what was happening on social media in relation to their content moderation policies. And one of the things that we found was that there's these content moderation policies around hate speech, around disinformation, particularly in relation to elections. But when we tested it through adverts that we created, either containing disinformation or like hateful speech against migrants and refugees, we found that these policies really weren't being implemented and upheld. And so I think that's going to be a major thing going into the election as well, because things like xenophobia and elections you know, intersect and interrelate, and we know that political parties can use it as cheap politicking points as well. And so I think those are some of the things that that you would see as well in your data. Okay, thanks so much everyone for joining us, and thank you to the speakers who gave your input. We're going to do a quick photo shoot with the speakers just holding up these pledge signs. And then I think there are some other people in the audience who we'd like to also ask to come in. Hold these signs. Yeah, so I think everybody just needs to maybe stand in front of the table. In front of the table. One of the photographers maybe just coordinate this. Let me see. I think there's a couple of other people also, Cynthia, Marjorie, I know Pumla's in the audience. You said Dana as well, Zakira? Yeah, anyone who wants to come and stand and we can take these pictures, that would be great. So maybe whoever's just here, just swap. Okay? Cynthia, you can maybe grab this one here. Sure. Marjorie? Yeah, but maybe come in the front here. Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, and Defend Our Democracy staff as well, Zinzi. Yeah, I can do yours. Sure. Sorry. Good. I think that's great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely day. Sure. Yes. No, that's Oba King's. This one is mine.